Once upon a time, droving was a way of Australian life. To see a giant herd of cattle meandering along the roadside or poking through the streets of a country town was the norm rather than the exception. But in the 80s, droving is a dying art. Motor transport is gradually taking over from the men, horses and dogs who were once entrusted to take stock throughout the countryside. And with their demise go the myths and legends of Australia's stockmen. But for the time being at least, legend is being recreated in the Hunter with the staging of the Great Merriwa to Maitland cattle drive.
Oh. Hey! Come on.
It's a memorial to the old-time drovers who in earlier days brought thousands of head of cattle at a time from Queensland into the Hunter.
This is really probably the last of the old-time cattle drives that we'll know in our generation between now and the end of this century, and probably you'll never see the like of it again, and neither will the people of the Hunter Valley.
And so the 30-day trek began, and it was on day 22 that we met up with the drive just west of Gresford. Already they had wandered through Denman and Singleton, and already had encountered rain, thunderstorms, searing heat and freezing nights. But despite that battle against the elements, the excitement of marching into the history books as Australia's last great cattle drive remains. And who better to be at the head of such a grand event than Viv Walsh, the seemingly ageless drover who has spent 40 years on the road, a man reputed to be of enormous droving experience and few words.
Oh.
Nothing better. I think I'm pretty healthy, though I'm supposed to be crook, but...
What do you reckon's so good about it?
Oh, just freedom, I suppose, and fresh air. You're not breathing the same air that most of the other people are breathing, are you?
It's a living, Viv says, is in his blood. Certainly it must have flowed from his veins to those of his nephew Stephen, who has been with him on the road for 15 years. It's a wonderful story of family tradition, but unfortunately one that won't be passed on to future generations, as droving slowly fades into obscurity in the modern world.
The younger generation don't seem to be interested in it.
Not really.
You know what I mean? They're not. I've got 3 boys, and they've all did their time on the road with me, did 2 or 3 years each, I'd say. But, not interested.
Is it a hard life?
No, I think it's a lazy life. It's a free sort of a life. The work's not hard, but the hours beat you. Don't beat you, but from before daylight till after dark, as I say. No union. That's the trouble. We ain't got a union.
Hey! Come on.
But it seems at least the magic of the life of a drover has still managed to capture the minds and hearts of many of today's youngsters. Since setting out from Merriwa, crowds of children have joined the drive for short periods. 4 teenagers have been a part of it since the outset and will ride into Maitland tomorrow. For them it seems to have been a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Clearly, if most had lived 50 years ago, there's little doubt they would have chosen a life on the road with horse, cow and dog for company.
I only wish there was more droving around Stravers. Not every week or every month that there's a drove around, and this is a good drove, yeah.
Oh, I think it's really great, and I think more kids just should get into it before it's all gone.
Certainly those days in the saddle have been magical, but probably even more memorable have been the nights, special, intimate occasions that capture best of all the life of these gypsy rovers.
Enough tea in it? Yeah, right. All right.
This is what the evenings for the people of the cattle drive are all about. The chance to sit down and relax around a campfire, basking in the afterglow of a good meal and good company. These evenings are just as important to the drive as the miles they must cover every day, because talk is the best medicine when you've spent a hot, dusty day in the saddle staring at a row of cattle behinds and mile after mile of dusty road. On this day, the village of Gresford is just 10 kilometres away and is to be treated with a bird's eye view of the drive as it makes its way through the main street. As the drive nears, many residents sneak out in their cars for a preview, and then as it wanders through the town, still more gather outside the Hotel Beatty. Even a carton of liquid refreshment is brought out in honour of the occasion. At the school, children line the footpaths to wave the drive on, their excitement evident at seeing an event they'd only heard about in lessons and something their teacher told them they'd never see again. Viv knows his time is limited. Soon he'll have to trade in his horses and his dogs for the memories. That will be like losing an arm for Viv. Surely it will be the hardest thing he'll ever have to do. But so strong are the ties with his droving life that Viv will only look back on the days with true affection.
I'd do it all over again. Do it all over again.
I believe that if you want something badly enough, yes, you can certainly put your mind to it and overcome the greatest of odds, really.
Years ago, he was a junior policeman starting a career on the beat. She was a secretary with an insurance company. Although they had never met, they did have two things in common. Amazingly, both were born and grew up in the English Midland city of Nottingham, and most importantly, both loved ice skating. They skated before work, after work and weekends. Then in 1975, when Jane was just 18 and Chris a year younger, they skated together for the first time.
It was very early in the morning, 6 o'clock or something in the morning, because that's the only ice time that was available. And we both came into a cold, dark ice rink in the morning and spent about an hour skating together. And we were very polite to each other. We didn't say much and just listened to the coach that was with us.
Yeah, I just remember it was very cold. It wasn't sort of one of those idyllic meetings, really, was it? It wasn't sort of the sun out and the bells ringing or anything like that.
It was, in fact, the beginning of a very special relationship. Their progress together was dramatic and reads like a diary of prestigious skating events. In their first year together, Torvill and Dean won England's Northern Championship. In 1978, 11th in their first World Championship. In 1980, 5th place in their first Winter Olympics at Lake Placid. 1981, European and World Champions. 1982, European and World Champions again, and British Champions for the 4th year in a row. Then they realised their ultimate goal. This performance in the 1984 Winter Olympics at Sarajevo won them the first ever perfect scores in ice dancing, a gold medal, and made the young skaters legends in their own time.
The judges, looking first for originality and difficulty, recognized their supremacy by giving them 8 5.9s in this section. But the marks for presentation were even better. 3 perfect 6s.
The world fell in love with Torvill and Dean in 1984 and was watching when they returned home to Nottingham and a hero's welcome. The couple made good use of their enormous popularity, springboarding off the Olympics into a professional career which has been no less successful. They have toured England, Australia, the US and Canada, often to sell-out audiences. Scenes of fans lining up for hours for tickets are now commonplace, but there have been few complaints about the waits or the prices. Torvill and Dean have spent so much of their lives on ice that it seems only natural to talk to them out there, so here goes. Thanks very much. Well, you two really have spent so much of your time on ice, you must feel a bit like ducks out of water when you're not on ice.
Yes, we get most of our accidents walking on the street rather than on the ice, actually. So, yes, it's a bit like that, fish out of water.
Well, of course, in most people's minds, it's a single name now, Torvill and Dean. How important is it to each of you that you skate with each other?
Well, like you say, it's a double act, you might say.
We enjoy working, in a company situation and doing pieces which involve, of course, our ice skating with other people. But most of our work is together, doing duets.
Yeah, we wouldn't change now in this sort of stage of our career. We've worked so hard and so long together that we are the best that we can be together.
There's also that tag of superstar skaters and known all over the world. Does it make life hard, Jane?
No, not at all. I mean, on the contrary, people usually welcome us to their town and things like that, especially here in Newcastle. People have been really friendly.
This is the look of the latest fashion in the Australian meat industry. Venison has been a favourite for thousands of years on the dinner tables of Europeans and Asians. As breeding techniques improve here, it is becoming Australia's fastest growing livestock industry, with estimates of over 10,000 head of deer in New South Wales alone. Roosa Park is one of the Hunter Valley's biggest deer farms. What started as a hobby for its owner Beresford Smith more than 2 decades ago has now become a passion and a livelihood.
Come on!
I fell in love with deer 44 years ago, and deer are my life. I mean, it's like people race motor cars, some people climb mountains. Deer are my forte, and that's all there is. That's basically what it's all about. And because deer are deer, they're similar to horses and cattle and anything else, but to have good ones is the hardest part. There's no question about that. And you've got to upgrade and be quite severe in culling to upgrade your animals at all times.
But there are some deer that Beresford admits he couldn't part with. The animals with the best conformation are kept for breeding, ensuring this infant industry will at least grow into a quality one. It costs $1.20 a kilo to purchase live beef at the markets, which is then sold for about $2.50 per kilo to butcher shops. Venison costs $3.50 live weight and is sold to butchers at $6.50 per kilo and can retail anywhere between $13 and $20 per kilo. Deer are intelligent, hardy animals and can be run with cattle or goats. Their main expense is erecting the essential 2-metre high fences and purchasing breeding does, which can cost over $1,000 each. There are less than 200 registered deer farms throughout New South Wales. These dedicated few have persevered in their breeding. Now that the meat is gaining in popularity, there is not enough venison to meet the demand. A staggering 80% of New South Wales venison is imported from New Zealand. Beresford has recognised New Zealand's success in its exports and wants Australian deer farmers to grab the opportunity.
New Zealand is exporting something like 4,000 tonne a year. For example, this is going mostly to Europe, but we haven't touched the Japanese market, we haven't touched the Korean market, which is traditionally venison eating and venison byproduct countries.
Mike Scarf is one of this state's best qualified people to talk about exporting Australian venison. The Department of Agriculture recently sent him on a fact-finding tour of Japan to find the best way of developing and marketing the gamey meat.
We're looking mainly, first of all, for the Australian domestic market, but that won't be long before that market is certainly fulfilled. Then our next market is the Asian market before the European market. I've been lucky enough to just come back from Japan, looking at studying in the Asian and the Hong Kong markets. I think that the future of the industry itself, going through the last 2 years of the ups and downs of trying to promote a product, the opportunities overseas, and now that we are allowed to import live deer from New Zealand, is going to build up our breeding herds dramatically here in Australia, giving a very viable operation to export a product.
His company, Merriwa Meats, is Australia's first deer-only abattoir. To get the meat to this stage is a lengthy process. Deer are easily stressed, and stress changes the texture and flavour of the flesh. So Merriwa installed pipe classical music to calm the animals. 2 years ago, Mike Scarf was killing a maximum of 10 deer a week. Today, it's well over 50.
We went into it as a challenge, really, as a new adventure in the agricultural industry. It is something that the Australians are definitely acquiring a taste for, but also that we are catering for the ethnic and the European consumers in the Australian market. We found that the demand was there. The industry is only a young industry but growing rapidly, so there was no abattoir in Australia that was catering just for the deer industry itself.
One of the industry's main problems was overcoming what they refer to as the Bambi syndrome.
We found that mothers with small children were probably the worst. When their children attempted to try it, they'd grab them by the hand and pull them away and say, "That's Bambi that, the man's cooking." So the kids became frightened of it, but after a while people accepted that it was an abattoir animal. It was being killed under abattoir conditions, and it was on the shelves for anyone to buy, so they came along and they bought it.
Back on the farm, Beresford Smith experienced the same problem.
It's quite hard to let people walk up through the deer farm and come back and sit down and have a venison steak. It's been nice to have a hobby for so many years, and then to set up a wildlife park and the combination of a deer farm and wildlife park and to sell my own venison, and to see people enjoy the final product after all the years of work is a lot of satisfaction.
This small cottage at Dudley has meant a change of life for many Hunter residents, struggling to cope with a family member who has Alzheimer's. The disease can cause immense pressure on the family unit. Sufferers become confused and disorientated. They cannot remember simple tasks. They constantly wander, and sometimes their frustration turns to violence. As we highlighted in our report last year, these difficulties often mean nursing homes will discriminate against Alzheimer patients, refusing to take them in, citing the lack of proper accommodation and extra supervision needed. The family is then chained to the constant care of the patient, with little or no outside help. Now there is a local facility which offers daycare for the sufferers and relief for the carer. The Ocean Centre at Dudley was established in August last year, but by Christmas its books were filled. It offers a unique service to Alzheimer sufferers, and judging by the community's response, it's a service that has been desperately lacking in the Hunter region.
Well, it provides some respite care for the person who is almost a prisoner at home, caring for somebody who is totally dependent upon them. It allows or gives a day out to the people that come to the centre here and provides some measure of relief so that the carer can refresh themselves ready for a new day.
The centre can care for 10 people each day. It's 3 full-time workers and a handful of volunteers have found the recipe for success lies in giving the patients useful but basic things to do. The cheerful atmosphere of the Ocean Centre and the relief that it provides has this dedicated team hopeful that more centres of its kind will be established.
I think that the powers that be, the decision makers, should be looking at this sort of a service and the demand placed upon it and measure its success.
Noel Manning has been training greyhounds at North Rothbury since 1969. We met him on a neighbouring property, where he showed us some of the live rabbits caught near his track. Noel is angry at the outcry over the use of rabbits in training. He claims they're dead before they're used as lures, and that their fate is better than that suffered through myxomatosis.
Within 14 days, these rabbits, which I've got here at the moment, will die. One of the worst deaths you could ever imagine.
Why is that? What sort of death?
Well, they end up going blind after about 7 days.
That's myxomatosis, right?
Yeah, myxomatosis. Their eyes pus up with a sort of a pox, and they walk around blind, bumping into everything. They cannot feed, they cannot drink, therefore they starve to death, and they just leave the disease wherever they lay.
Noel's practice is to use frozen rabbits. They're killed by breaking their neck before they enter the property and then are stored in a cool room. When it's time to start the training of a young dog, the rabbit is attached to the lure. The dog is then set in the starting box, the lure gathers speed, and then the dog is let go. To prove a point, the rabbit is then replaced with a Hessian bag. The theory is that the dogs just love the chase and are attracted by anything that moves. Which begs the question, why use the rabbits at all?
Well, when you're using the live ones, or when you're using live ones, yes, I reckon it's cruel. Anything's cruel to be seen torn up. But by using the frozen ones or a bag or a piece of hide or anything like that, the dogs are taught to do it. Yeah.
You mean it's all just part of this sport? It's a way of greyhound racing?
It's just a way of greyhound racing. If every part of the world, they use a rabbit to start off on. Whether they use a live one or a dead one, I don't know. Some people...